back in the day, there was this show called Life with Grandpa, which was basically this Christian puppet show. It was meant for toddlers and children, and the characters in this show were humanoid looking puppets. Grandpa, which was basically like the main host of the show, he was kind of made to seem like someone that you look up to. And then you have his wife, 3 children, Techi, Davida, and then you had Davidito.
Life with Grandpa, what can be more fun? Living where there's love for everyone.
It seems innocent right now.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord. God bless you. Here we are once again. Let's all say hello to the children that are watching.
Hello. I love you. Hello.
Praise the Lord. That's a lot of love.
Before the show was even aired, there was this story called Life of Grandpa. It talks about one of the kids questioning why they have different skin colors even though they're related. And Grandpa starts telling them that your mom golfed other men and conceived you guys.
Is this showing us scene?
Yeah, so it
What
tells
the
them.
fuck? And this is all supposed to be for kids?
The author of this and the creator of the show was a cult leader. He was a religious cult leader. The show, Life with Grandpa, is based around him and his family. And he basically believed that kids should be involved with their parents and adults' lives. I'm not going to talk about all the graphic stuff.
He was a pedophile.
Yes,
basically.
bro, yes.
They literally look like the characters on the show, bro.
Davidito, his real name was Ricky Rodriguez, and he endured the most abuse out of everybody since he was David's first son.
One night, a girl was walking down the street when she saw a blind man coming towards her. He was having trouble getting around, and he asked the girl to do him a favor. "Can you please help me deliver this letter?" the man said. The girl was a nice person, so she agreed to help him. So she took the letter, and it had an address on the front of it. As the girl turned around and started walking away, she took a glance back at the blind man who was running away, and didn't seem blind at all. The girl was super suspicious, so she took the letter to a nearby police station. The police went to the address, and it was a butcher shop owned by an old couple. It was all okay until the police asked to open the large refrigerator in the back of the shop. The old couple went silent and refused, so the police opened it on their own. Inside the refrigerator, they were confronted with a horrible scene. There were countless dead bodies hung up by meat hooks and shelves stacked with human flesh. Until this point, the police overlooked the letter the girl received from the blind man. They then decided to open it, and it contained one chilling line. It said, "This is the last one I'm sending you today."
This is breaking news. There's been a major plane crash in Washington, D.C. Just this evening, a passenger plane traveling from Kansas to Washington, D.C. collided midair with a military helicopter. You can see the collision in this video. And right now, helicopters, EMS, and local police are searching the Potomac River, looking for victims and survivors from this incident. Now, as this is a breaking news story and this just happened within the hour, it is currently unknown how many survivors there are going to be from this incident. But I can't remember the last time there was a passenger aircraft crash like this in the United States. So based on initial reporting, there were 60 passengers on that flight from Kansas to Washington, D.C. And somehow when that plane was preparing to land at the Reagan Airport in Washington, D.C., this airport pictured right here, the passenger jet collided with that military helicopter. Like I said, it is currently unknown how many people are injured, how many people have lost their lives. But I have a feeling that this is going to be an absolutely massive news story. Incidents like this don't really happen that often in America. And I mean, it's just incredibly shocking and frightening that a passenger jet could collide with a military helicopter like this. And obviously, I'm just hoping that everybody that was aboard that flight is going to come out of this all right. But it is frightening and a little disheartening that they lost track of the plane and at this moment are searching for the wreckage in the nearby river.
I swear this is the most surprising ride for anyone to ever be killed on at Disneyland. I'd expect to be a roller coaster or something fast moving, but this is honestly like a kid's ride. So I wanted to cover a Disney case. As many of you guys know, I recently went to Disneyland Paris, but this case is coming from Disneyland in California. If you didn't know, the park first opened in 1955 and had a number of rides, obviously, that aren't in operation to this day. They've kind of evolved over the years and changed. Parts of the rides remain the same, but the vast majority have changed. In 1974, the park opened the new $6 million attraction called America Sings. And the idea was basically it was a very tame sit-down ride. It was almost like a carousel. You could even bring little kids on it. It was basically a revolving room that played songs and told a bit of a story while you sit and watch. There was essentially like a center stage and the park goers would sit in a circular rotating wheel. The ride was about 24 minutes long, and there were a few members of staff to kind of guide people in and out of the seating before and after the ride. One of these staff members was 18-year-old Deborah Stone, who was just working there as a casual job. She was known as a really kind young girl. She was always polite and was very hardworking. The ride had only been open for about a week when tragedy struck. At 10:30 p.m. on the 8th of July that year, something horrific unfolded in front of horrified parkgoers. Deborah was trying to help passengers in and out of the ride into their seats when she suddenly lost her footing and ended up wedged between the rotating wall and the stationary wall. So you can imagine what happened next. She was completely crushed in front of these terrified families that could all do nothing but literally just watch this horror unfold. One guest said he saw what he thought was a child being pulled between the platform and he heard screaming. The ride was immediately evacuated, but the girl could not be saved. She was pronounced dead at 11 p.m. that night. And although the ride was shut pending an investigation, it was opened up very shortly after with just like a basic alarm system fitted that would alert people if there was a danger, essentially. Deborah's family sued Disney and the ride was ultimately changed to Star Wars Launch Bay many years later.
I don't know about you, but this video has been all over my For You page lately, and I had no idea what was happening in it until I looked this case up. Okay, what we just watched was 39-year-old Aubrey Horton, who was an Atlanta police officer attempting to break into a home before being fatally shot. At around 5 a.m. on October 4th, Aubrey was seen running through the St. Andrews Country Club neighborhood wearing only shorts and screaming. He's then seen on someone's Ring doorbell camera slamming himself into the door. Now, the couple in this home did not know Aubrey, and the wife had actually just left for work, but she began receiving a bunch of notifications from Ring and saw what was happening, so she called 911. Her husband, who was still in bed sleeping, was woken up from the commotion and armed himself before going down to the front door. It is important to note that just a few years ago, their house had actually been broken into. Someone had kicked down their back door while they were sleeping, so they put up cameras and extra locks on their doors. So when Aubrey was pounding on their door at 5 a.m. in the pitch black, the homeowner brought a gun with him, thinking that he was about to break in. You can hear on the video footage the homeowner trying to ask Aubrey if he could help, and he eventually cracked the door open to see what was wrong. You can then hear Aubrey scream, quote, "No, kill me," before forcing his way inside and knocking the homeowner down. And fearing for his life, he shoots Aubrey, instantly killing him. As this was all happening, a Douglas County patrol officer who lived nearby heard the commotion and came over to help. And they were able to identify the person who broke in as Aubrey Horton, an off-duty Atlanta police officer. Aubrey lived close by, about a half-mile away, but the two did not know each other at all. A toxicology report is pending, which could take several months to be completed, but authorities believe that Aubrey was either experiencing a mental health episode or was under the influence of something at the time of the break-in. Aubrey joined the Atlanta Police Department in 2015 and was part of the fugitive unit. Just days before he was killed, he was honored as Officer of the Year. At this point, police say that they're confident that no charges will be filed against the homeowner since he was acting in self-defense. But this video is proof that life can change in a split second for everyone.
He turned the cartel's victims into soup. Santiago Mesa Lopez, known as the Stew Maker, worked for one of Mexico's most brutal cartels during their violent war with a rival group. His sole job was horrifying: to make bodies disappear. Using large industrial drums, Santiago would mix a caustic brew of water, lye, and other corrosive chemicals into this boiling concoction, and he would then dump the dismembered bodies of murdered rivals, letting them dissolve for hours until only a sludge of smudged tissue and small bone fragments remained. It was a gruesome, methodical process that erased almost all physical evidence of the cartel's mass killings. While the cartel waged its bloody war above ground, Santiago was deep in the shadows, cooking the dead, turning human bodies into unrecognizable stew. On average, Santiago claimed he disposed of 30 to 50 bodies a month. Sometimes the process took just a few hours, other times it took an entire day depending on the victim's size. In total, it's believed he dissolved over 1,000 people during his years of service. For this unimaginable work, Santiago earned just $600 a week. When he was finally arrested in 2009, he chillingly admitted his role without emotion. His capture stunned the nation and brought horrifying clarity to the thousands of missing persons cases haunting Mexico. Families desperate for answers hoped Santiago could tell them what happened to their loved ones. But most bodies had already been reduced to nothingness.
You remember about the legend of Chupacabra?
Yeah.
Do you know where it originated or no?
I think Central American country.
Puerto Rico. The legend started back in the 90s. A bunch of reports were pouring in about this creature that attacked people's livestock, specifically goats. They were all reported with 3 bite marks on their necks and that their blood was drained from the animals' bodies. And nobody knew what was causing this. It wasn't until this woman, she said that her first ever encounter was visiting her mother's house. Out the back door window, she saw the creature and they made eye contact for a little bit until like she screamed and then it just jumped into the jungle, disappeared. And she described Chupacabra to be a 4 to 5 foot long-limbed earless creature with spines on its back, and its eyes were massive, kind of like alien-like, grayish green skin, reptilian looking. Some people described it to have bat-like wings. Some other people described it to be like a humanoid-looking dog or a genetic creature gone wrong.
I've seen people describe it and they say like it looks like a rat.
¿Tú saliste corriendo cuando viste la criatura? ¿O te quedaste quieta? No, yo me quedé quieta porque agraciadamente la tuve al frente mío como por espacio de 2 minutos más o menos. Y ahí pues pude ver sus rasgos, su cuerpo. ¿Cuán cerca estabas? Aproximadamente como a 5 pies de distancia.
It got really popular, and then a lot of people in Mexico started talking about it as well. And TV Azteca ended up posting their own special about Chupacabra as well that traumatized people.
Mire, desde Puerto Rico, luego pasó a Estados Unidos y ahora aquí en México.
Ha sido vista principalmente en países de Latinoamérica.
About to be a newly single mom, and I am in the middle of a divorce. My husband is being incredible though.
On December 28, 2024, the police conducted a welfare check on Jennifer Sheffield. And when they entered her residence, what they found was incredibly disturbing. Inside of the home, they found the bodies of Jennifer Sheffield, aged 30, and the body of her estranged ex-husband, Brandon, who was 40 years old. At the time, the two had been going through a divorce. And sadly, the couple was raising 2 daughters together, one of whom was present at the time of the events that unfolded. On December 10th, Jennifer posted that video that I started out this video with, where she praised her ex-husband, said the divorce was going very well, and talked about how excited she was to start fresh in life. However, on December 27th, Brandon had showed up to the residence, shot and killed Jennifer, and then turned the gun on himself. Friends and family members of Jennifer and Brandon came out in the news afterwards and said they never thought Brandon could hurt anybody. They said he wasn't a violent person and they just don't know what caused him to snap. And since the case is still unfolding, we really don't have the exact details on what happened. But it's all too familiar. I feel like we always hear this from friends of perpetrators of violence. I never thought he could do such a thing. Or he just wasn't capable of such violence. But they always are capable of such violence. And now sadly, because of this man's selfish actions, Jennifer's 2 daughters have to grow up without their mother. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast that I co-host with my wife Courtney, Murder in America. It's available on all streaming platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
She killed her mum so she wouldn't find out about her secret, but now the whole world knows. It was the 3rd of March 2020 when police were called to do a welfare check on a property in Ohio at around 1 p.m. Brenda Powell lived in the house. She was the 50-year-old mother of Sydney Powell. And Brenda worked at Akron Children's Hospital and was such a grafter, and they absolutely loved her there. She treated the kids at the hospital like they were her own kids, always so loving and caring. Now, the welfare check came about after Brenda had been on the phone with Sydney's former school, the University of Mount Union. Now, during the phone call, the member of staff that she was on the line to suddenly heard banging and screaming, and then the line went dead. And he actually tried to call her number back, and it just rang out and out. And after ringing back twice and getting no answer, he knew he had to ring the police. When officers arrived at the property, they found Brenda Powell in a pool of blood on the floor, and tragically, after being rushed to hospital, she was pronounced dead. Investigators knew they needed to work out what had led to this horrific murder. Now, the conversation that Brenda had been having on the day with the school on the phone was absolutely vital to finding out who was responsible. Brenda had in fact been made aware on the call that 19-year-old Sydney, who was, as I said, her daughter, had in fact been kicked out of the school and she was no longer a student there. It was no coincidence that it was during this phone call that the mum had been murdered. Now, when police found her body at her home, the only other person at the scene was Sydney, her daughter, and Sydney had an interesting tale to tell. She told police there'd been a break-in, she heard a noise, and apparently her mum had told her to run for her life. She said she'd heard screaming and then had run back to her mum and found Brenda on the floor. Now that just sounds suspicious to me. Like, why would you run for your life because you know there's a danger, hear screaming and decide to run straight back into that danger? After being questioned, it was very clear that the officers were not buying this story that Sydney was telling, so she actually started to tell a different tale. She would try and plead insanity. She said she could barely remember anything from that day. She just remembered crying and feeling like she needed to run away. Brenda had suffered 30 stab wounds and had also been struck in the head. This was obviously a very brutal attack. But Sydney's defense in court tried to claim that she was suffering from an undiagnosed schizophrenic episode and that she killed her mum while experiencing like a psychotic break. However, it is very rare for people with schizophrenia to act violently, and it was concluded that Sydney had been exaggerating her symptoms to try and get away with this murder. She was thankfully found guilty of murder and given life in prison, but is eligible for parole after 15 years.
My grandma killed her mom in the same fashion as Eric and Lyle Menendez killed their parents. Scratch that, it was actually in a much more brutal and gory way. And there are so many similarities between the two cases, yet their outcomes are completely different. So let's talk about it. In September of 1990, my grandma Chris was giving her mom Lois a bath. Lois was in her 60s and was recovering from a hip surgery, so she needed the extra help. And my grandma didn't mind going to her home to help her. They both lived in Yakima, Washington, which is my hometown. At some point during the bath, my grandma brought up her childhood and how she was severely sexually abused by one of her stepdads. I won't go into detail about the abuse, but just know that it was really bad. This is when Lois reportedly admitted to knowing about the abuse the entire time it was happening, but she blamed my grandma for it and not the stepdad. What followed has never really been explained, but an altercation happened that resulted in Lois, my great-grandma, drowning. Instead of calling the police, my grandma went back to her house, which was right down the road, and didn't say a word to anybody. Over the next 2 days, according to what my grandma said, she couldn't stop hearing Lois's voice, even though at this point, Lois had long been dead. So my grandma went back to her house, where she was still in the tub, obviously, and she proceeded to dismember her mom with a handsaw. She cut her body into 8 pieces, focusing on her jaw, because she said she needed her to stop talking. And then she threw what was left into a local landfill. She took the major pieces, which included her head, artificial hip, and jaw, and put them into 2 garbage cans, and then filled them up with cement. My grandma then rented a storage unit where she hid her mom's body parts for 2 whole years. Now, during this time, she was spotted by Lois's neighbors in her backyard with a blue tarp and a shovel. But she would go on to tell everyone, including the police, that Lois had taken a spontaneous trip to Hawaii with a rich man that she had recently met. She even faked letters claiming to be Lois that she then sent to everyone, trying to make things look less suspicious. I still have one of the letters, and it's honestly really creepy to read knowing the truth behind it. During this time, my grandma cashed Lois's social security checks and even sold her second home and kept the money. In total, I think she stole around $140,000. People started suspecting that she could have been involved in her mom's sudden disappearance, and after investigators started focusing on her, she turned herself in 2 years later. Now, during the trial, the defense argued that my grandma just snapped because she had PTSD from the severe trauma that she experienced as a child. It was argued that my grandma's mental growth was stunted because of the abuse, and so when her mom admitted to knowing about it the entire time, it pushed her over the edge, causing her to commit murder. Because of this, my grandma was convicted of second-degree manslaughter and served just under 2 years in prison. She's been out ever since, living in the exact same house as she was during the murders. Because of how much attention that the Menendez brothers story is getting, it's caused me to really compare the two cases, and I just can't help but notice how similar they are. It's kind of scary. But the only difference is my grandma only served 2 years in prison. She's gotten to live a relatively normal life ever since. Meanwhile, the Menendez brothers are serving a life sentence. They didn't get a life, and I just don't think that's very fair when there are cases almost identical to theirs with such different outcomes. Don't get me wrong, murder is bad, and no shade to my grandma, but it's not hard to see why she got out and they didn't. In both cases, the suspects killed their parents in a brutal way. And technically speaking, my grandma was probably a little bit worse with how she did it. They both lied to cover it up afterwards, but while Eric and Lyle only lied for 6 months, my grandma lied for years. They both spent their parents' money after the fact, which doesn't look good in either cases, and they were all victims of horrific sexual abuse as children. Yet for some reason, my grandma was seen as a victim while Eric and Lyle weren't. And I know for a fact it's because men who experience sexual assault even as children a lot of the times aren't seen as victims. And it's a shame because they were victims and they are victims, just like my grandma was. And this all happened around the same time, so it's just really crazy how similar they are, yet how different everything ended up for them. I just cannot stop thinking about this, and it is really eating at my brain. I'm just really hoping that the new evidence in the Menendez brothers case will be taken into account. They deserve a life too.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
We're asleep, and she gets up to go to the bathroom, and I'm like, oh man, I have to go to the bathroom too. So I'm going to go to the bathroom in the main bathroom outside the room. I go out, I come back in, and I'm like, why'd you turn my light on my side of the bed? Like, it's 12, we're going to bed. Like, we're in bed. She's like, I didn't do it. I thought you did. I'm like, okay, well, somebody's trying to get our attention. My phone rings. It's my little sister. She says, hey, Bob, sorry, are you awake? And I'm like, I am now. I go, my light just came on. She goes, that's why I was calling you. She said, is Nicole there? I'm like, yeah. She put her on speaker. She said, Nicole, I don't want to get personal, but did your mom have miscarriages before you? And she's like, yeah. She goes, I'm seeing 3 people in the room right now trying to get your attention. And they're your 2 brothers and your sister that weren't born.
There's actually a dark, terrifying origins to the Amber Alert. This happened in 1996 in Arlington, Texas. And it was a little girl called Amber Hagerman, who was 9 years old. And she was riding her bike at her grandparents' house along with her brother Ricky. Next to the grandparents' house was a supermarket, which was abandoned. Basically, they're riding their bike there, you know, having fun and all. The little brother decided to go back to the house. So she stayed at the parking lot. That's when a black pull-up truck pulled up to her. A man got out of the truck, grabbed Amber, threw her inside the truck, and he dipped immediately. Now, luckily, a witness was able to, see it happen from his backyard. So he called the cops immediately. The cops showed up pretty fast, bro. Like, within minutes. It was pretty fast. So there was a huge search for Amber all over Texas, basically, hoping that they could find her and see who abducted her. Even with all that happening, bro, like, they still couldn't find her. About 4 days later, there was a man who was walking his dog at midnight.
Haven't seen this photo on the internet as of late. This is just moments before 12-year-old Emma Brown took her gun and used it on her father and then herself. Last September, Emma and another 12-year-old friend devised a plan to murder Emma's family and her pets and then run away to Georgia together. Shortly after this photo, she then proceeds to shoot her father in the stomach and then run toward her driveway to take her family car to meet with her friend about 230 miles away. It's believed in this moment that Emma might have panicked and then shot herself in the process. The thing that's raised a concern is, as of right now, Emma's friend, who hasn't been publicly identified, is believed to have planned the entire ordeal. One of the biggest discussions as of late is that Emma's family had no idea how her and her friend had actually met, but she has been arrested and charged with a conspiracy to commit murder. Now, the father did end up surviving the incident, but now conversations are being struck throughout the entire internet about whether or not parents know who their children's friends are. The police have also raised concerns and reports blaming social media for this occurrence. So the question now is, was this a preventable incident?
He was friendly and he was nice and he was so funny. He was so funny. He would always have me laughing. We used to play this game called Kick the Can, and he was the fastest runner, so we always wanted to be on his team.
Richard's friend Patricia found him kind and caring.
If we wanted to take a shortcut to school, we had to cut through this really tough neighborhood. And he always used to wait for me, sitting on a little pony wall, and then he would walk me to school. It was always safer, to be in twos, I guess. He used to sit in back of me in 5th grade, and I remember that he would poke me in the back. And every time he would poke me, I would jump up. And so that time that he kept poking me, I turned around very upset, and I said, hey, stop. And I remember him like slumping over and then just hitting the floor on the side.
He would have seizures. He would be shaking. We knew he was sick.
Third murder, which is the second incident, okay? I'm in the middle of trying to get my record sealed, right? Thursday night, I killed her. I took off Friday. I didn't go to work. I called in sick, took CTO, all right? Dismembered her body, got rid of her body, but kept her head in her hands because they're identifiable. They're highly identifiable. I kept those at the apartment, okay? That Friday night, Thursday night, I took her. Friday morning she was dismembered. Friday night she was disposed of, right? Saturday morning I left, right? And I wasn't satisfied that I took the head along in the hands, but I couldn't put them someplace that could be sure they wouldn't be dug up by an animal or just be somewhere. It's scary going out there trying to bury somebody or dispose of body parts in a community or out even in the boonies where you don't know where you're at and who can come up at any moment. I had some real close calls there where people that come out of nowhere. And if a body's found and they remember this beige-looking car sitting there the night, that's evidence. So it was very, very hard to get rid of this stuff.
For the record, you are guilty of killing many women and girls.
Yes. Yes, that's true.
Ted, how did it happen? Take me back. What are the antecedents of the behavior that we've seen? So much grief, so much sorrow, so much pain for so many people. Where did it start? How did this moment come about?
I grew up in a wonderful home with two dedicated and loving parents, one of 5 brothers and sisters. But as a young boy, and I mean a boy of 12 or 13 certainly, that I encountered outside the home again, the local grocery store, the local drugstore, the softcore pornography, what people call softcore. As young boys do, we explored the back roads and sideways and byways of our neighborhood, and oftentimes people would dump the garbage and whatever they were cleaning out of their house, and from time to time we'd come across pornographic books of a harder nature than more graphic, you might say, more explicit nature than we would encounter, let's say, in your local grocery store.
2022, the town of Slaughter, Louisiana, was shaken by the death of 36-year-old Lacey Fletcher. Lacey suffered from a medical condition known as locked-in syndrome, making her almost completely paralyzed. Due to her medical condition, Lacey spent all of her life at home, as she began to develop some degree of Asperger's syndrome. Lacey's parents were her caretakers, although they neglected that responsibility and treated Lacey inhumanely, leaving her to relieve herself on the same couch that she spent most of her life. Lacey's neighbors stated that the last time they saw her in public was 15 years before this incident. At the time of her death, Lacey weighed 96 pounds and had contracted COVID-19. On January 3rd, 2022, Lacey was found dead in a couch covered in feces and urine. It was believed that she was in that same spot for years without being catered to. Her body was covered in ulcers, her hair matted and filled with maggots. Her parents, Sheila and Clay Fletcher, were charged with second-degree murder and detained for the severe chronic neglect. Despite all of this, they pleaded not guilty and were released on bail. Sheila and Clay Fletcher will begin trial on June 19th, 2023.
This influencer's body parts were found in pots of human soup just last month. On the 15th of February, 28-year-old model Abby Choi posted a beautiful photo on her Instagram. She had no idea of her horrific fate less than 2 weeks later. On February the 25th, 2023, police made a horrifying discovery. A splatter-proof makeshift butcher's workshop was found in a rented 3-story home. Inside of the home, they found 2 human legs in a fridge and Abby's decapitated head in a soup pot. Alongside the head, carrots and radishes were also in the process of being cooked. Minced human meat was also found at the scene. In the rented flat, police found a homemade butcher's shop equipped with meat grinders, chainsaws and meat cleavers. Abby's handbag was also found at the scene, including her ID, which helped to identify her. Heartbreakingly, Abby was a mother of 4 young children. Police in Hong Kong have charged Abby's ex-husband, Alex Kwong, his father and brother with the murder. It's alleged that the 3 men rented an apartment where they'd meticulously planned the murder. It's also alleged that the motive for the killing was a family dispute over money. Abby's children are now being looked after by her mother.
Yeah. And you asked me to come here from California because you had something you wanted to say. It is not just an interview with a man who's scheduled to die tomorrow morning. I'm here and you're here because of this message that you're talking about right here. You really feel that hardcore pornography and the doorway to it, softcore, is doing untold damage to other people and causing other women to be abused, killed, and raped.
Listen, I'm no social scientist, and I haven't done a survey. I mean, I don't pretend that I know what John Q. Citizen thinks about this. But I've worked in prison for a long time, and I've met a lot of men who are motivated to commit violence just like me. And without exception, every one of you was deeply involved in pornography, without question, without exception, deeply influenced and consumed by an addiction to pornography. There's no question about it. The FBI's own study on serial homicide shows that the most common interest among serial killers is pornography.
That's true.
And it's real. It's true.
Ted, what would your life have been like without that influence? You can only speculate.
Yeah.
911, where's your emergency? I just killed someone. 100, Route 46. What do you mean you just killed someone? Exactly what I said. I'm armed and dangerous. Where are you? You know what? I'm armed, I'm dangerous, send the cops out. I'm in a parking lot, I can see from every angle. I will shoot at anyone who approaches the car. Okay. How many people did you hurt? You know, I'm not in a condition to talk. Okay, can you at least tell me what city you're in so I can send the police out there? Mountain Lake. You're in Mountain Lakes? Yeah.
How many people did he kill? Just one person?
Just one person.
Just one person?
I'm reloading right now. I'm going to shoot at anybody that approaches the car.
Okay, that's not a problem, sir. I'd advise you not to reload and do that, but... What's your name? You just hung up on me.
10-year-old serial killer. Viewer discretion is advised. This is Mary Bell, and she could easily be one of the most sadistic murderers in history, even though she was only 10 years old. Mary allegedly grew up being abused, and her mother would even sell her to other men at the age of 5. All of this abuse fueled this anger inside of her, and she had to find some sort of way to release it. On May 11th, 1968, Mary Bell was playing with a little 3-year-old toddler, and he mysteriously fell off of an air raid shelter. This was the start of her violent outrage. Just 2 weeks later, on March 25th, the boy Martin Brown's body was found dead inside of an abandoned building. It was later discovered that Mary lured this little boy into this abandoned building and strangled him with her bare hands. 2 years later, Mary then strangled a 3-year-old boy and carved the letter M into his stomach with a razor blade. And then she used scissors to cut and mutilate the body. Mary eventually confessed to this by writing notes because she was bragging about it, and the police arrested her. Here's the crazy thing. She was arrested and released just a couple years later, and today she could possibly still be alive. One of the terms for her confession was that after she was released, her name would be changed and everything. The latest information we have of her is pretty much she had a daughter when she got released, and nobody knows where she's at now. So what do you think? Do you think she should be forgiven because she was a child, or do you think that fire is still inside of her waiting to strike again? Let me know in the comments down below, and make sure to like and follow for more videos.
One of the strangest missing persons cases I've ever seen revolves around someone that might not even exist. Let me explain. In 1989, a local Chicago television station called WMAQ was wrapping up their regularly scheduled television for the night, when all of a sudden the audio was cut and the image on screen was changed to a strange missing persons panel. The image of the individual shown was too low quality to make out any details, and no information other than the woman's name, Joanna Lopez, were given. The broadcast wouldn't be too out of the ordinary if it wasn't for the fact that she was never mentioned anywhere again. And when people tried to find her, they found no records of a woman named Joanna Lopez in Chicago, even with police filings. So, who was this woman in the broadcast? And how did a missing persons panel for her end up on the news? Well, when the news agency was asked about the panel, they claimed it was sent by an anonymous person, which leaves us with the most likely answer being that it was a prank or an alternate reality game. And as for who was actually in the photo, the lead seems to be a woman by the name of Rachel Lopez. A photo of her was found in a West Chicago yearbook from 1990, and although she has a different first name than Joanna, the fact that they look so similar and share a last name leads many to believe that she could be the one in the photo. Sadly though, it seems like we may never know for sure, as no one has been able to contact the woman in the yearbook.
In 2007, Knoxville, Tennessee was rocked by the brutal murder of 21-year-old Shannon Christian and 23-year-old Christopher Newsom. Shannon and Christopher were headed to a party on the night of January 6th. When they didn't show up to the party, the couple's friends started texting and calling them, but received no response. Around 11 p.m. that evening, a couple of their friends went to Shannon's apartment to see if they were there. Shannon and Christopher were not at the apartment, and they were unable to locate Shannon's SUV. It turns out that the couple were victims of a carjacking and kidnapping. The couple was taken to a rental home where they were essayed, tortured, and murdered. A witness arrived at work around 12:30 a.m. on January 7th. He noticed that the lights of the rental home were on and the home seemed quite busy for that time of night. The witness later observed a white 4Runner slowly drive by him with 4 men in the car. Another witness stated that they heard gunshots around 1:45 a.m. near the railroad tracks. That afternoon, around 12 p.m., Christopher's body was found near the tracks, wrapped in a comforter. Shannon was failing to respond to calls and text messages all day long. Using the last ping from her cell phone, authorities found her white 4Runner. On January 9th, authorities went to the rental home and found her body in a trash can in the kitchen. There were 5 people who helped commit this sickening crime, 4 of which were convicted to life in prison without parole, and 1 was convicted to the death penalty.
911, what's the location of the emergency? Please help me! Yes, what address do you need help? I'm not on an address, I'm on a road on Myers Road! He's trying to kill me! Which road are you on? Myers Road in Oregon City! Okay, do you have an address? Listen. Be late, come on, get a cop here now! Okay, who's trying to kill you? My husband! He's trying to pick up truck! Okay, what? He's trying to kill me! Come on! He's trying to die! And what kind of gun does he have? Ma'am? Ma'am? I've got... Ma'am, take a deep breath so I can understand you. Ma'am? I've already got help coming. I need you to tell me wire and what? On plan. I'm on plan. Wire. Just a minute. I'm walking. He shot me. Okay, you're on wire at Glenview Court? He shot me. Okay, where did he shoot you? In the chest. In the chest? He's over there.
Baby Burger, uno de los casos más traumáticos, atroces y perturbadores de la Deep Web. Todo comienza con una cámara de seguridad apuntando hacia una calle, en donde se observa a una mujer que va caminando con su bebé. Sabemos que es una bebé, porque la madre dio su declaración a la policía de lo que pasó aquella vez. Después, se observa que un automóvil llega y 2 sujetos salen rápidamente. Uno de ellos toma a la mujer y la empuja, mientras que el otro sujeto toma a la bebé y la mete dentro del automóvil para así escapar. La toma del video continúa en un bosque. Los sujetos aparecen con un pasamontañas, para no ser identificados. Proceden a sacar a la bebé del automóvil, para llevarla a lo más profundo del bosque, hasta llegar a un lugar donde hay una mesa muy grande. El otro sujeto procede a traer un aparato, el cual en este momento del video está cubierto por una tela amarilla. Uno de los sujetos toma a la bebé y la coloca en la mesa, para empezar a abusar de ella, en un terrible acto donde escuchamos los gritos que son desgarradores. El volumen del video sube exageradamente, provocando la risa de uno de los sujetos. Después, procede a darle algunas bofetadas, a lo que comienza a sangrar de la boca. Uno de los sujetos toma a la bebé de los pies, el otro, toma el artefacto quitándole la tela amarilla. Vemos que es una máquina para triturar troncos de árboles. Encienden la máquina y el sujeto posa frente a la cámara, dejando caer a la bebé. La cámara hace un enfoque a la caída de la bebé en dicha máquina, a lo que ésta se llena de sangre, igual que las camisas de los 2 sujetos. Finalmente, la cámara enfoca a la carne molida que sale de la máquina, para que los dos sujetos comiencen a comerla.
If I didn't know this was a true crime case, I would think it was a disturbing horror film. On the morning of the 7th of October 2022, a barefoot woman was running around Excelsior Springs, Missouri, bashing on people's doors. Witnesses describe her looking like she came straight from a horror film and she was calling for help. She'd been beaten, held captive, and SA'd for weeks. The woman was a shocking sight. She was covered in injuries and was wearing a bin bag. Disturbingly, she was gasping for breath as she had a very tight metal collar locked round her neck. It was a nurse who opened the door to her and let her come in. The nurse started to call police, and at this point the woman panicked. She warned her that the captor would kill her and claimed that he had killed her 2 friends. When police got there, the woman explained that a man called Timothy had captured her the month prior. He'd been holding her hostage this whole time. She said he'd been keeping her locked in the basement and had been SAing her. Disturbingly, she told police that he actually had a young son who lived at the house with him. When Timothy had taken his young son to school the one day, she used it as her opportunity to escape. Police made their way to the home of 39-year-old Timothy Haslett Jr. and found the property did in fact have a basement like the woman described. Timothy was arrested and is facing 9 charges including first-degree kidnapping. He's being held on a $3 million bond and faces 5 life sentences. Before his arrest, police were actually called to his address 3 times. Twice they were asked to do welfare checks, and this was from an employer and also family members. Police have searched his home with cadaver dogs and they haven't yet released what they know.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there.
Mysterious case absolutely does not sit right with me. Someone knows something and has not come forward. On the 12th of July 2015, 18-year-old Tiffany and her parents attended a graduation party in New Jersey. At around 9 p.m, one of Tiffany's friends spoke to her parents and claimed that they were really annoyed because Tiffany had used their debit card without permission. Tiffany initially denied this to her friend, but then did admit this to her mum Diane a little bit later. At this point, they were all outside Tiffany's house and Diane went inside to find her husband. When she returned outside of the house, Tiffany had vanished. Now, they were able to see Tiffany on the deer cameras that they had outside the house. She appears to be walking down the driveway in her normal clothing and white headband. When they tried to find Tiffany, they actually made a terrifying discovery. Her phone was lying on the floor at the bottom of the driveway. Immediately, they knew something was wrong as Tiffany never had her phone out of her sight. At 11:30 p.m, her family called the police. Little did they know, 27 minutes earlier, Tiffany had been hit by a train. Frustratingly, pretty much straight away, police presumed this death to be a self-unaliving. However, that just didn't seem to fit with the evidence presented. All of Tiffany's family and friends said how much of an upbeat person she was and that she was really happy at the time. She was making plans for the future, and the autopsy also showed that she had a clean toxicology report. Now, in the deer cam footage, she was fully clothed, but when she was found, she was just in her underwear with no shoes on. Upsettingly, 2 weeks after her death, Tiffany's mum actually found her missing trainers and headband more than a mile away from the tracks. Could someone have murdered Tiffany and then dumped her body on the train tracks to make it look like she did this herself? Tiffany's parents certainly think so. They definitely suspect some foul play was involved.
This is Japan's youngest murdered at only 11 years old. Nevada murdered her best friend.
I honestly think this is one of the most interesting and messed up cases ever. And if you haven't heard about this case, click in that video and she'll give you the gist of what happened. When I first heard about this case, I saw every video, read every article about it. Anything I could find, I saw it or read it. And after so much research about it, I found some things that not a lot of people know about this case. For example, the first thing is this is not Nevada. This is somebody wearing a costume of Nevada. Yes, a costume, like in Halloween, dressing up as an 11-year-old murderer. This is an actual picture of her, one of few pictures that we have of actual Nevada. There's a lot of more pictures of people dressing up as her, but I don't want to show them because some are really gruesome and I just don't think there's anything cute or funny about dressing up as a murderer. So yeah, some even try to make it sexy. It's just I don't know, I just think it's weird. Another thing is that, I mean, this is not the real girl, but for the sake of the video, the actual Nevada, that's not her real name. Nevada is not her name. It's just what people started calling her because she had that sweater on when she did the murder. Nevada Tan. Due to Nevada being so young at the time of the murder, her name was not sent to public to keep her safe in her identity. They never know her name because now she's out of jail and she has changed her name, probably changed states. She could be in the US, we don't know. But yeah, we're probably never gonna know her name.
This is one of the most disgusting and evil cases I've heard of recently. On the 7th of December 2017, teacher Thelma Boinville was desperately trying to make some extra money. She was doing a cleaning job to earn extra money for her family, and the job suited her as her 8-year-old could come along and play while she worked. This was really handy as it meant she didn't have to fork out for childcare. She set out cleaning some holiday homes on the day in question and her daughter waited in the car. The spot was a lovely scenic place called Kelky Beach. However, instead of walking in on a normal holiday rental to clean, she walked into a nightmare. Stephen Brown and his girlfriend Hayley Dangerand were in the middle of robbing the place. They were scouring through drawers and wardrobes, hunting for valuables to steal. With Thelma walking in, their plan had been foiled. They decided they needed to dispose of their only witness. The evil pair tied up the mother, whose daughter waited unsuspectingly in the car outside. They used a machete, a knife, and a hammer to murder the innocent woman. But the horror was far from over. They exited the holiday home and came across Thelma's young daughter waiting in the car. They callously told the young girl, "We killed your mum," and then bound her up and gagged her. Sickeningly, they then took the 8-year-old into the home where they'd killed her mum and left her there tied up. The 2 Australian tourists who were renting the holiday home then came back and found the crime scene. The 2 killers were tracked down hours later in Thelma's car, which they'd stolen and driven off in. Hayley was actually wearing her victim's earrings at the time. They actually begged for the officers to just shoot them and end their lives, but they wouldn't get away that easily. Thelma's husband, Kevin, wasn't actually allowed to see his wife's body due to the extent of her injuries. The autopsy revealed that she'd fought for her life, with many defensive wounds indicating a struggle. Since the murder, Stephen and Hayley have both tried to blame each other. Stephen was found guilty of second-degree murder and apparently showed no emotion as the verdict was read out. Hayley is currently awaiting trial.
Now that it's summertime, here are 3 of the scariest theme park accidents I've ever heard of. These stories are ordered to get more intense as it goes on, so if the first story is too much for you, then you probably don't want to stick around for the third. On June 21st, 2007, 13-year-old Caitlin Lassiter went to Six Flags of Kentucky. While she was here, she decided to go on the Superman drop ride. This is the kind of ride that lifts you up really high into the air and then it drops you down really fast. However, when their car got to the top, a cable snapped and became undone. This cable became wrapped around Caitlin's throat and feet. She was able to untangle the cord from around her neck, but she wasn't able to get to her feet before the ride dropped, and both of her feet were pulled off. They were able to attach one, but she did end up becoming an amputee. On June 2nd, 2015, the Smiler roller coaster in the UK was having several problems, and one of the test cars got stuck in the middle of the track. However, the employees hadn't communicated with each other that they had added a 5th car, so everyone thought there were 4. So when they saw all 4 cars at the station ready to go, they assumed that the test was done. They then loaded a car full of passengers and sent it down the track, not realizing that a car was already sitting stationary in the middle. The car with passengers inside rear-ended the empty car, resulting in serious injuries. The 2 girls that were sitting in the front of the car had to have their legs amputated. And the horror of this was all made worse because it took emergency services 4 to 5 hours to reach them as everybody was sitting mangled on this roller coaster. The Verrückt water slide was the world's tallest water slide in August 2016, where our 3rd accident happened. This water slide had an extremely steep drop and then a hill, and 3 people would sit in each boat. The owner of the water park had actually self-insured this slide because it was too dangerous for any insurance company to take on. In August 2016, Caleb Schwab went to the water park with his family, and the very first ride he wanted to go on was Verrückt. Caleb sat in the front and was too lightweight to weigh it down, so the ride went airborne. Then everyone watched in horror as the front of the slide impacted the metal safety railing that arched over the top of the slide. He flew out of the raft but hit the netting so hard that he was, you know. It was quick for Caleb, but not for the crowd, as they then had to watch the boat finish the ride as the water began to run red. A guest at the park physically restrained Caleb's mom so she couldn't walk over and see what happened. So the last image she has of her son is excited to go on the ride and stepping into the line.